Thank you very much. Hey, good morning. Hello, special guests, CPAC attendees, and all Americans who share in the hope and promise of our great nation, which I know that's why you're all here today to celebrate. You know, as CEO and as Executive Vice President of the National Rifle Association, I have the privilege of directing one of the oldest and most successful advocacy groups in the world. You know, at the NRA, we every single day are dedicated to protecting your constitutional rights and promoting our most cherished values and carrying the torch for freedoms that really do define the greatness of America. The NRA, and I know a lot of you share in being proud about this, we have grown to almost 5.5 million members, the most in our history. And we represent the interest of approximately 100 million or more American gun owners. Our members, and you see it, I see it every day, they come from every walk of life. They represent people of every race, every religion, every gender, every profession, and every political persuasion. And that diversity gives rise today to the plans for the future growth of our association. And it inspires us to embrace a more inclusive vision of ourselves. The NRA, believe it or not, we're a 148-year-old advocacy group built upon the strongest of foundations, the principles of our founding fathers. Our nation, and I know you all know this, it was founded by people in pursuit of liberty. That's what it was about, a nation in pursuit of liberty. That's why the Declaration of Independence is the first document of our U.S. legal code. In their great wisdom, the fathers of this nation saw the need to protect our God-given liberties, fundamental freedoms from being trampled by despots, dictators, and demagogues, and from the intrusion of the government that they founded. And so what they did is they left us with a list of our most cherished freedoms, the Bill of Rights, the first 10 commandments of our Constitution. And in our First and our Second Amendments, our founders gave us, each one of us, the two freedoms that historically belonged only to the upper class. Our founders gave us the freedom to speak freely and boldly and honestly. And they gave us the freedom to bear arms in defense of ourselves, our families, and our nation. You know, when I started at the NRA, and gosh, it's been more than 40 years ago now, we certainly faced all kinds of opposition. And to be sure, we engaged in full contact advocacy with those who challenged our point of view. We debated issues of importance to our nation, and we did it with all of our might. As opponents in these debates over important issues, the NRA, we often shared a seat at the table with those who opposed our values, even with those who opposed the Second Amendment freedoms for which we stand. And those debates back then, they were tough. I was there. I remember them like yesterday. They were spirited, and they were defined by committed, and they were defined by unwavering voices. But political differences aside, back then, there was a recognition that the NRA and advocacy groups of every kind were entitled to their voice in the discussion on matters that made a difference to the safety and security and ideals of our country. And here's what I really want you to think about. Boy, what a difference a couple of decades makes. Today, we at the NRA awaken each morning to new challenges, threats against our organizations, heated and vile political rhetoric, and new forms of opposition that violate the spirit and the letter of the very freedoms our republic was founded to protect. Today, many of our adversaries seek not only to challenge our opinions, but our very right to express them. Rather than compete in the marketplace of ideas, they want to rig the competition, foreclose it, or they want to shut it down altogether. And let me give you an example right now. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo hates the NRA. Yeah. He hates the freedoms for which we stand, and he's not shy about saying so. If you agree with our positions, the governor of New York says you have no place. That's a direct quote. I'm not making it up. He says you have no place in his state. Now, no matter how much he'd like to, New York's governor can't just expel gun owners from the state. He can't just go out and ban the National Rifle Association. If he did that, that would overtly violate the United States Constitution. So instead, Governor Cuomo decided to covertly violate the United States Constitution by using, this is really important to every American citizen, by using his power over Wall Street to starve the National Rifle Association of funds. Listen to this. A lot of you are hearing this for the first time, and I want it to sink in. At the governor's direction, New York's banking regulator sent letters to the CEO of every bank and every insurance company doing business in the state of New York. The letters urged those institutions to blacklist Second Amendment groups, especially the National Rifle Association. To deny us bank accounts, to block NRA members from purchasing affinity insurance, including health insurance for their families, to prevent us from purchasing ads on the airwaves, and to suffocate Second Amendment speech by choking off the funds that make speech possible. That's Governor Cuomo's goal. To achieve it, the governor didn't just threaten companies. He went out and acted. New York started to punish companies that did business with the National Rifle Association. The state imposed multi-million-dollar penalties and forced several of our business partners to abandon us. Let me say that again, because this is the United States of America. Let me say that again. The state imposed multi-million-dollar penalties and forced several of our business partners to go out and abandon us. Now, just imagine the national outcry if the governor of a red state did this exact same thing to Planned Parenthood or PETA or the Sierra Club. Imagine if a Republican governor forced businesses to blacklist groups based on the viewpoint of their speech. Oh my gosh, you know it, the media would be going nuts in this country. Fleets of constitutional scholars would be descending from every political persuasion. Every prestige newspaper in this country on the front pages would proclaim a grave threat to the First Amendment. And you know what? They would be right. Governor Cuomo would be wrong to try to censor Planned Parenthood, just like he's wrong to censor the National Rifle Association. It is morally wrong. It is morally wrong, it is legally wrong, and that type of coercion and oppression of free speech is downright anti-American. You know, as Governor Cuomo would soon discover, attempting to silence the voices of 5.5 million NRA members won't be tolerated. In New York, the NRA did what patriots have always done in the face of tyranny. We fought back. Your association, the NRA, we took the governor to federal court under the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. And in a great victory for principle over partisanship, the American Civil Liberties Union has joined our cause. They stood and stand shoulder to shoulder with the National Rifle Association, and I am incredibly proud to have them as a partner in this fight. The court has already upheld the NRA's freedom of speech claims against Governor Cuomo. And let me tell you, and I know you'll agree with this, I can't wait for our organization to get them in front of a jury. I believe, and I can tell from your applause, you're going to agree with me, I believe that Americans still keep faith with the Constitution of the United States, even when politicians don't. But against the backdrop of all this, the governor and his henchmen appear to have gone, if you can believe it or not, even a step further. New York's new Attorney General, the chosen candidate of Governor Andrew Cuomo, vowed to attack the NRA as a pillar of her campaign platform. Even before, and this is really important, even before day one in office, and without a shred of evidence that NRA's done anything wrong, the Attorney General publicly labeled the National Rifle Association a criminal enterprise like MS-13 or the Mafia. And she promised a fishing expedition into NRA's files at taxpayer expense to see if she could find crimes to substantiate her slander. In other words, I know, can you believe this is happening in our country? In other words, she promised to fulfill a vision quest that is little more than rank political vendetta. You know, contriving a criminal investigation to target a political opponent is the act of a third world petty tyrant, not a distinguished public official. And the America that I know doesn't tolerate such an abuse of power. Here's what's going on. In real time, right before your very eyes, we, the National Rifle Association, on behalf of all Americans, are fighting perhaps the most important piece of First Amendment constitutional advocacy in the history of our country. This case, this one we're involved with right now, will decide whether or not government can be weaponized against you if your opinion differs from theirs. True to this independent spirit, Americans have begun to notice Governor Cuomo's attack on the First Amendment. And I'll tell you, they don't like what they see. A Wall Street Journal columnist observed that the NRA getting its day in court is welcome news for those helping to restrain the power of government. He commented that there's an enormous interest for all Americans in making sure that a politician like Cuomo cannot abuse his authority to silence law-abiding citizens with whom he disagrees. Closer to home for the governor, a columnist from the state capitol in Albany wrote that the governor has essentially weaponized the state's regulatory authorities to go after the NRA, calling his conduct tyrannical. And political voices from the right and the left, all the way from the National Review to the New Republic, have defended NRA's free speech rights. You know, and it's really no surprise that the message from courtroom is being echoed in the court of public opinion. Our case right now is being discussed all over this country in law schools. It's that critical to the fundamental right of any American to speak. Let me say again, in our First and Second Amendments, our founders gave us, each one of us, two freedoms that historically belonged only to the upper class. They gave each of us the freedom to speak freely, boldly, and honestly. And they gave us the freedom to bear arms when we most need it, when we maybe are even all alone against threat. They gave us the freedom to bear arms in defense of ourselves, our families, and our liberty. These rights are the cornerstone and the foundation of our free society. From the start, they have made Americans different from the serfs and the subjects of the old world. And centuries later, these rights continue to make America not just different, but they continue to make America better than other countries. For NRA, the freedom of speech is as essential as any other liberty. Because you can't advocate effectively for our Second Amendment freedoms without the right to speak out against its enemies. No public official can weaponize the power of government to attack organizations. Simply, and I'm going to say it slow, simply because they have a different political point of view. You know, many believe that Barry Goldwater got it right when he said that extremism in defense of liberty is no vice. But what we are seeing today is extremism that's hostile to liberty. These extremists want to revoke your freedom of speech. They want to revoke your freedom of assembly and your freedom of association if you hold views that they don't like. And leftist pundits aren't the only ones who feel that way. The oligarchs of Silicon Valley want progressive speech amplified and conservative speech suppressed. A whistleblower at Google leaked a PowerPoint presentation last year titled The Good Censor. The document claims that Google, which is one of the world's most powerful monopolies, you all know that, has shifted away from the American tradition of free speech. It says Google shifted toward, quote, the European tradition of censorship. And wouldn't you know it, in the European tradition, Google began to censor firearms instructional videos this year. Yeah. Just like the Second Amendment, the First Amendment must be absolutely defended against all incursions and without compromise. And just like the Second Amendment, we should aim to exercise our First Amendment rights responsibly, not by censoring others, but by lifting up our own voices, by speaking out with dignity and with purpose and courage in a way that honors the Founding Fathers' gift to all of us. More, better speech. That's the way to fix America. George Washington said, and I don't know about you, but I love this quote. George Washington said, if the freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent, we may be led like sheep to the slaughter. My friends, rest assured, the National Rifle Association is never going to let that happen. You know, there's this great saying that I love, that adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it. I can tell you and I can promise you this, the character and the identity of the NRA is going to reveal itself in the most visible of ways. I promise you, we are going to fight back against anyone who attempts to silence us. And understand this, we will advocate as loudly and as boldly as ever for both our First Amendment and our Second Amendment freedoms in this country. My call today is for each of us, each one of us, to embrace and respect the constitutional freedoms that are afforded to all of us in this great country that we live in. This is our moment of truth. To our members, if you're already an NRA member, you're out there listening somewhere in Kansas or Nebraska or Maine or wherever, I want to thank you for standing with us and holding tightly to the freedoms for which we stand. And to those of you sitting here today, just learning of our cause, I invite you, become a part of the NRA, become a part of the future of the NRA, inspired by the constant belief in the spirit of America. Come join the NRA, the unabashed, unapologetic fighter for the freedoms that have always made America the greatest nation on earth. America, the home of the free and the land of the brave. God bless all of you. God bless the United States of America. And thank you very much, and keep fighting for these freedoms. Our country depends on each one of you. Thank you very much.